Fisheries and salmon have been critical for the survival of the Statlium people who have inhabited the Lillooet area for almost 10,000 years. The Upper Statlium control the premier Fraser River salmon fishing sites and were the major suppliers of salmon to neighboring groups with whom they would engage in trade and exchange. Over time, the abundance of salmon has declined dramatically, as you can see by the pictures of abundant salmon in the Fraser River and Seton Lake in 1906. Traditional methods of catching salmon on platforms with nets and preserving salmon by wind drying in racks have continued today. Fishing platforms continue to be used along the Fraser River today, with some variation in design and materials compared to Charlie Link's setup shown from the 1940s. Set nets, poles, and gaffs have also evolved over time using modern materials, but the approach remains the same. The Fraser River near Lillooet is important and unique because of its hot, dry, windy climate during salmon fishing time in summer. The dry climate enables air drying of salmon on wooden racks within a few days to preserve them for the winter. In the past, racks were built largely of poles, sticks, and branches found nearby the fishing site. Today, lumber and plastic tarps are more commonly used to build the racks, but the methods are the same as those that have been used for centuries. First Nations women have always played a critical role in cutting and drying the salmon, whereas the men have always been more focused on catching the salmon. The cutting and drying methods are like those used in the past, but today people commonly use coolers and deep freezers to preserve the wind-dried salmon. As salmon stocks declined over the years, several good faith efforts have been made to try and restore the populations by creating salmon hatcheries and spawning channels. For many years, the biggest runs of Fraser River salmon spawned in Seton and Cayuse Creeks every 4 years. The salmon swam up through Seton Lake, Portage Creek, and Anderson Lake to spawn in the creeks. The fingerlings remained a year in the lakes before swimming back to sea. The first salmon weir and hatchery were constructed at Seton Lake and operated between 1903 to 1910. The salmon were caught at the weir, stripped of their eggs to be hatched in the hatchery. The fingerlings were released into the creeks where most died. The hatchery was abandoned. Another Lillooet fish hatchery was built on the Fraser in the 1940s in the field just south of where the powerhouse is today. It too failed and was abandoned shortly after construction. The Seton Spawning Channel was built in 1956 to help mitigate the impacts of the Seton Lake Dam and Canal, built as part of the Bridge River Power Project during the 1950s. Land on the Cayuse Indian Reserve River was purchased by the Department of Fisheries in 1955 to create the largest artificial spawning grounds on BC for pink salmon. About 25 acres of river bottom was relocated. Rows on rows of gravel trenches were scooped out and re-lined with gravel to replace the Seton River, which was diverted into a canal and powerhouse. The spawning channel still operates today. The timing and numbers of salmon in the Fraser River runs at Lillooet are characterized by fish passages to other rivers to the north of Lillooet. For example, there may be large early-season sockeye runs passing by destined for the Stewart River, or later runs for other large tributaries of the Fraser. Similarly, the timing and size of tributary salmon's runs varies for Chinook salmon. Over time, the Seton and Bridge River runs have become a pink salmon run driven by the spawning channels at Seton and Gates Creeks, and the Chinook, sockeye, coho, and steelhead populations today are small. Salmon populations in the Lillooet area have declined dramatically over time for several reasons, including natural flooding, landslides, hydroelectric projects, population pressure, and climate change. Similarly, sport fishing for trout and steelhead that was plentiful in early days is still practiced but not as productive. The salmon runs and fishing on the 6-mile rapids of the Fraser River and Lillooet area continue to be the keystones of a vibrant and growing Statlium culture that today is more focused on preservation and sharing of the traditional methods and way of life rather than survival.